Yeah, we were actually called the Liberators going back to them days in '65. We were a 5-piece playing in local dance halls, and we came across an impresario called Reg Calvert.
A colourful character by all accounts.
Indeed he was. It was very colourful. Yeah, he used to run these dance halls up and down the country. Well, I think he ran Banbury Winter Gardens, which is like locally here, which I think is no longer. Kettering Central Hall, Rugby Town Hall, High Wycombe Town Hall. He had quite a good little circuit going, and most bands that used to work for him came from the Birmingham Midlands area. He originally came from Southampton and run a pop school in Rugby. We weren't actually in the pop school, we weren't resident, and we happened to live on the doorstep, so it was handy. It was great the way he sort of like took us on, and he liked the band because we were wearing colourful jackets and doing various things, and he did a lot of zany things. Of course, he also had the fortunes at the time.
So the name Pinkerton's Assorted Colours, because, the assorted part's been kind of dropped these days, but it was Pinkerton's Assorted Colours. A bit of a mouthful for disc jockeys back then.
Quite, that's right, yes, it was. The first record, it was like Pinkerton's abbreviated Assort Colours. And then I think we did a record, then our third and fourth record came out with Pinkerton's Colours on. And then it went down on to Pinkerton's on Magic Rocking Horse. So it was getting smaller all the time. But better for the label, I suppose.
So you were going to be called P at the end of it, were you?
That's right, yes. Just basically down to P.
So was it easy to get record deals back in those days? Because it seems that everybody who was anybody actually managed to get release somehow over there back then.
Yeah, I think it was easier then. People were signed for so many deals, contracts, that were just sort of a 3-4 record deal. These days, if you do a contract, maybe a 1 record deal, you're lucky. But we played some songs, went down to London, played some songs to the Kinks, A&R man Shell told me. And he just said, oh, well, we'll do that one as an A-side, we'll do that one as a B-side. And we went in the studio, and it really was as simple as that. And we got a release on stateside, which was unusual too.
Tell me the story about the stateside connections, because that was kind of time of the Motown, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. There was all sort of people like Gary Lewis and the Playboys and that type of bands you expected to be on the stateside label. But they did actually do a few releases in the 60s because they wanted a catchment, obviously, of British bands. And they thought, well, we'll do this on the stateside label. But as I say, it's very unusual, really, for a British act to go on that label. And as I say, we came out under the Liberators, just put that one that was just prior to being Pinkerton's Assorted Colours.
So when you finally got the contract with Decca, why did you settle for Decca? What happened there?
I think that was because of the manager. He already had a deal with the Fortunes, who were already signed to Decca. So it was quite easy. He knew literally everything was in place. He knew Dick Rowe was the main man who said yes or no. And he found an A&R man for us called Tony Clark, which he did Miramura, who had previously played bass in one of his bands called Danny Storm and the Strollers. And he later went on to do great things with the Moody Blues.
You wouldn't have names like that anymore, would you, in the UK?
No, you wouldn't. That's right, no.
So Mirror, when did you actually write it? Where did the song come from?
It was just about 3 or 4 songs I wrote, and this one just sort of came, and we put a bit to it, and it just sort of like came virtually out of nowhere. You know, the idea was obviously taken from the fairy story Snow White with the first line. And then it sort of sprang out from that.
And there was the use of the autoharp, which was pretty unusual back then. Was this your idea?
In actual fact, in those days, we had another singer who actually played the autoharp, and it was the manager's idea to have this gimmick. We'll play an autoharp. We'll have something a little bit different, with that type of sound. Various people had used it to some extent, the zither, and used it on different records, but hadn't really electrified it successfully. And of course it's got 36 strings, so it has to be very careful how you electrify it, because it can ring on and ring on.
And you play the autoharp now, don't you? You still carry it with you?
Yes, I play it now, that's right. So I keep fixing it up and keep bringing it out of its case, and it shows itself every so often, yeah. That's right. Still there, yeah.
Now, you did Top of the Pops. How many times back then?
I think we did it on every single. I think we did it a couple of 3 times on Mirror. We certainly did it once on the next single, Don't Stop Loving Me Baby, and we did it again on Rocking Horse. So I guess all in all about possibly half a dozen times.
Yeah, what do you remember from those experiences? I mean, who was the DJ back then? Was it Jimmy Savile?
Jimmy Savile did one, I think. Alan Freeman, who's a great guy. He did one, and then not David Jacobs, Pete Murray, he'd do one. It was that kind of sort of era, where they'd sort of like change it around a bit. But Alan Freeman, I think, did most of the ones we did alongside Jimmy Savile.
So back then, I mean, as you said, there were a lot of acts who had 3 or 4 hits. It's kind of like, I mean, Swingin' Blue Jeans probably had about 3 or 4 singles, and they've been living off that ever since in a way. And there's something really special about the 60s in that. I mean, you can get bands from the 80s and 90s who have, have recorded probably 6 or 7 songs, and they're just forgotten. But everyone goes back to the special days and in the old days back then. It was a pretty special time.
Yes, yeah, I think it was, yeah. I mean, you talk about the Swingin' Blue Jeans, they're very good friends of mine, actually. Les and Ray, I don't know too much of the drummer, and Colin, I think, the guitar player. But Les and Ray, of course, are originals from the original days. And yes, really good days, I mean, for them. I mean, I would imagine that it's very interesting to note that they actually played the Cavern more times than the Beatles.
Really? Yeah.
They hold the record for playing the Cavern the most times, so I believe, according to one official source up in Merseyside.
So did you ever play with the Beatles and some of the bands like that?
We did the circuit, never actually played with the Beatles, but we actually did that circuit, like I say, round Kettering Central Hall, Banbury Winter Gardens and that sort of place, Nuneaton Carp Hall, and the manager we had a wonderful photograph of the Beatles backing a girls' singer way back in the 60s, and nobody took in a blind bit of notice of them. Early 60s, about 62, 61, something like that. And with their back to the band, drinking bottles of beer, and the girl singer screaming herself to death.
Who was the girl, did we know?
Well, she went out under the name of Tanya Day. I don't know what she's doing now or where she is now. Maid Mariam was one of her names, and Tanya Day, I think, was the other.
Now, Reg, we mentioned earlier, of course. He came to a bit of a sticky ending. What actually happened there?
Well, we were actually working up in Barnsley area, and I was in the hotel, and I heard it come over the news, and I thought, God, I can't believe this is not true. So I actually rang the police station, Saffron Walden, and they confirmed that it was true. What it was there was a lot of pirating going on between pirate radio stations, and there was a power struggle going on between him and his partner. And there was a lot of things happening, Radio North Sea was like set on fire, and there was literally piracy between the stations and a lot of competition.
Good grief, exciting days, as we said. Now, I mean, the music scene back then, there seemed to be an awful lot more chance to get played on the radio. There was a lot more freedom in terms of, what was able. Once the pirates came in, of course, because after the BBC sort of very staid formula tended to go by the wayside, thanks to like Radio Caroline and people like that, then the airwaves tended to open up and there's a lot more exposure. I mean, we're talking like 1960s, obviously. Compare that now with the 1990s, where you can hardly get on if you're a new band. I mean, you're disappointed, like many musicians, that the way radio has gone.
Yes, I think so. I mean, when you heard, for argument's sake, stations like Radio London, which was the one I used to listen to as we were sort of like coming up, changing over from Liberators to Pinkertons, and they had some wonderful stuff on that, and the disc jockeys were very sort of colourful characters too. The whole thing was just a very good scene completely, whereas now it's a little bit, I mean obviously it's moved on to different things. It can be a little bit disjointed, to be honest,
Because, I mean, radio stations these days are very tightly formatted, and it's kind of safe radio, it's commercial radio. They're out to make the adverts and stuff and get the big audience. They don't seem to want to or be interested in, apart from perhaps Radio 1 and very few others. There doesn't seem to be the need there to go for the new music. They're just out for commerciality, which is a sad thing. Do you think it'll ever get back to the old pirate days, which kind of, broke a lot of new acts?
Well, it only really needs somebody to start the ball rolling on a certain new type of radio sort of station and setup. I suppose that it could do that. It could get back, It just needs some people to just, pioneering people to get back and do it.
Right, well, Pinkerton's Assorted Colours, the era ended, and a new era began under the name The Flying Machine.
That's right.
What was the feeling behind that?
Well, once again, Tony McCauley, who wrote the hit for Flying Machine, Smile Little Smile for Me, it was decided to change the name from Pinkertons. We'll try with a new name again. So we put this record out in England and Europe. Europe, it did really well. It didn't do so well in England. Was what's known as a turntable hit. In the States, of course, it was massive. It went really big, gold in America and Japan as well.
And you did the Ed Sullivan Show, didn't you?
We were going to do it. No, we didn't do it. We were supposed to have done it, you know. It was talk about doing it, yeah.
Right, what happened then?
We never actually went to... We never actually promoted it in America as a band. We were going to go over and play, but it was one of those things between the Federation of Musicians and Musicians Union. They couldn't get it together between them, so, you know, the exchange for the American band, and we'd go over there.
Right.
And there was talk of us actually recording with the Cufflinks as well. The Cufflinks... recording manager.
And of course their big hit was called Tracy, if I remember right.
That's right, Tracy, yeah. It was, yeah. All
those years ago. Now, a character called Stuart Coleman was in the lineup. Was that early on in Flying Machine?
Yeah, well, yes, he was in Flying Machine right from the start, because he came into Pinkerton's about 68, and no, I think earlier, 67, he came into Pinkerton's, and then when the name changed to Flying Machine for this record, he was there, yeah. And in fact, he plays electric piano on the introduction of the song "Smile Little Smile for Me," as well as playing bass.
Right, and of course he's gone on to incredible things in the studio, in particular, producing people like Shakin' Stevens, which I don't know is a good thing or a bad thing looking back now, because Shakin' Stevens has come in for a little bit of stick, as it were, but commercially very, very successful. And I think back in those days, when you compare it now, there was more opportunity for songwriters to write really good melodies and really good pop songs, whereas nowadays it tends to be very much more kind of intricate musically, and you know, the indie scene has sort of come to the fore more. Is that disappointing from a songwriter's point of view?
I guess so. I guess for some songwriters who actually write like nice songs, ballady songs, and actually nice sort of lyrics and nice melodies, then it can be very disappointing and frustrating for them. And some songwriters who are friends of mine have actually moved out of the country due to that and gone to sort of the States to live.
People like Roger Cook, for instance, and I think TonyMcCauley was involved at one point. Obviously, he wrote that song for you. What was the relationship like back then? Because you were under contract and recording quite a few of his songs, and then Tony left to get involved with the Bell, very successful Bell record label, and people like the Drifters and stuff like that. And I think he wanted you to go with him, but you didn't go. Then there were one or two problems.
There was we were contracted to Pie Records, so we couldn't go with him unless we just broke the contract and just went and did a thing which people had done in the past, and just said, well, to hell with it, we'll fight this out in court and have the hit record. And then, but we were tied there, and John McLeod was still tied to Pie, so we did the album with him, and even McCauley was like there as an advisor, but not off the record. That was, he actually wasn't there as a producer anymore. But that was the reason, through contractual problems.
But he sort of got his own back in a strange sort of way, didn't he, back then?
Yes, we did, yeah. I mean, he had Love Grows out, which should have been the second single for us. And of course, it was such a terrific song, I mean, like an instant hit, that Bell decided to take him on instantly and use him to launch the label, which is what he did. So we missed out on that. So he had to fabricate a new band called Edison Lighthouse, which came out, well, as a hit, was number one here, I think, and in the States.
A massive hit in 1970 as well. Yeah, back in the old days.
That's it, yes.
But I mean, the song "Baby Make It Soon," which you recorded, and that was going to come out as a single, which of course it did come out as a single. Later, a hit for Marmalade. But he brought a rival version out, which kind of stole your thunder a wee bit.
Yes. Well, I mean, he brought out a version. I think that was put out in America. We did have a version out in America also, which did well in California and around there, and I think Marmalade did it maybe, I don't know whether it was 6 months or 3 months later. But we actually did the song first. It was actually put on the album first, and when people sort of hear it, they think we did it, we were copying Marmalade, but it wasn't. We actually did it first.
So any hard feelings now with TonyMcCauley? I think you're all mates again, aren't you?
Yes. I mean, I don't have any hard feelings at all. I mean, he was a very mercenary when it comes to songwriting and very placing songs. But no, I went and had a drink with him a couple of years back when he in Brighton. We went to a bar and had a drink and a chat about old times. Because I remember we used to go around his flat and we'd work on songs around his flat in Paddington when he lived there. And he was producing then for Long John Baldry, Foundations. And actually, he'd just about to do that song for Scott Walker, The Lights of Cincinnati.
Now, as a songwriter, of course, I mean, you had the big hit with Miramura, and it's kind of very interesting because people like Raymond Froggatt, certainly on the British country music scene, of course, back then, had Big Ship for Cliff Richard and the massive one, Red Balloon, Dave Clark 5, again, round about this sort of early to mid-1960s. And Froggy, although he's written some tremendous songs, has never really captured that songwriting success worldwide. And the same sort of things happened to you, really. I mean, Miramura was a massive hit, but you've obviously gone on and kept writing songs, but nothing's really happened. Must be a bit of a disappointment, but why do you think that is?
Well, I think one of the reasons was that as far as I can make out from the record company, the policy was, I don't think it was released in a lot of countries, to be honest. The last one, Smile Little Smile for Me, which was, say, written by TonyMcCauley, that was put out in different countries, Japan, America, Germany, Holland, Spain, everywhere. But Mirror really wasn't distributed like it should have been, and maybe if it had gone into other markets, then it'd have been easier for me to write songs in other markets.
Well, let's move on to 1971 or thereabouts, when there was a change in lineup again. Phil Clough and Mike Summerson, which and yourself, of course, and that trio has in fact been together now for 26 years.
Yes, it's a long time now. The band as Frontline has been together quite a long time now.
That's really unusual.
It is. Well, in this day and age, it is, yeah. I think it's people understand everybody, and everybody's, you've usually sorted out all your differences, and you know what each other's thinking, and you usually know exactly how not to upset somebody. I think you've worked with somebody that length of time, 26 years.
You just about know them by now.
Yes.
So what actually happened towards the end of the recording side? Because obviously the hits dried up effectively. When was the point where things just weren't happening anymore as far as Flying Machine were concerned?
I guess was when we went to renew the contract at Pie Records, and Louis Benjamin was there, and we at the end got another manager, Peter Walsh, and they didn't want to take up the option, and so that was when we went to private stock after that.
Mm-hmm. And what year was that? Must be about sort of mid-70s, was it?
Yeah, it would be, yeah.
And you changed your name?
We changed the name, tried another record under the name Willow, which wasn't our idea, but it was the guy who was the promoting it. It was his idea.
So after all the hit records and the glam times of the 60s and doing the circuit and working with all these people and television appearances and things like that, to suddenly find yourselves without a record label and basically doing lots of gigs but not having the glamour side of it again, obviously that was missed. But what was the incentive that kept you going throughout the rest of the 70s and since then?
I think there was a lot of different angles, different kinds of work we did, where we were in cabaret, where they had a lot of cabaret clubs, and we were doing those up and down the country. They were quite fun. You'd be there for a week in one club, which was nice. You didn't have to travel that. Once you got to the club, that's it. You were there for the week. And then after that, we sort of went into sort of the country scene as well, still keeping our roots in the pop scene. But we went into the country music scene, that was nice, and that was quite interesting. Doing the Wembley Arena, meeting a lot of the American artists. That was really nice.
Why country? Why country music? Because, it's interesting enough because a lot of the 70s pop writers, Roger Cook and people like that, Greenaway, of course, and I suppose TonyMcCauley to a certain extent, have all penned hits for country artists. Why do you think that is? Does that go back to the melody side again, which seemed to be lacking in pop, and maybe the country artists were always keeping faithful to a good song, obviously, but also a good melody? That's
right. I think you're right there. I've hit the nail on the head, where people used to bring out nice melodies, nice lyrics, Roger Cook in particular, that they probably wasn't getting a vehicle over in this country for his songs, whereas in America he does. As far as we were concerned, we were doing in the show, we were doing quite a spattering of Eagles songs, which were very close to country anyway. Though we didn't know it, somebody said, "Well, that's very country. Why don't you go further into country?" And so that's what we did, keeping as much as to the band sides of it. Certainly, my favourites were the bands that nice harmonies, nice melodies, with nice backups of guitar and stuff like that. Steel guitar and stuff.
Because the thing was, I mean, back in the sort of mid-70s, people like Dr. Hook, of course, and Dennis LaCour, obviously, of Dr. Hook, and the Eagles, were never really getting a lot of country music airplay. But kind of 20 years on, the scene has, in a sense, progressed, and now that music from the 70s sits very nicely with 1990s country.
That's right. Yes, I think you're right there. Well, the Bellamy Brothers too, which had 2 or 3 hits, but are also very much, they could play in a pop venue and they can also play in a country venue. They can satisfy both scenes.
So how did the British country music establishment react to Pinkerton's Colours sort of hanging their hats on country?
I think most people were really good about it, and I have to say that Jessie Kent, who put us on at Wembley, she was great and all the way through. But there were some sceptics that thought, she's just a pop band jumping on the country scene, which wasn't the case, really. I mean, everybody liked country music anyway, but there were some people that thought that, they thought it didn't say it. It had been said on a couple of occasions. People were brave enough to say it. Wouldn't have overheard them say it. I think they're just a band that's jumped on the bandwagon, which wasn't true.
But the irony of it all, I suppose, is that there's been many British country bands who've started off in country who've been dying to break into the pop market. And you actually, in a sense, went the other way. So you were looking for a more country sound and they were looking for a more pop sound.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. I mean, I've heard country bands going over and doing, like, for argument's sake, they'll do a Beatles medley or a Searchers medley, which they're trying to sort of do mainstream stuff and then come back into the country scene. Maybe they're doing it to try and make the people more aware of it, or maybe they're tired of just doing country and they want to do both.
And I think you were nominated for a couple of Best Band Awards in the country music scene, is that right?
Yes, I think so, yeah. We did one a club up near the London Airport, Heathrow Airport, Osterley, the Grange. It was called the Grange Country Music Club. We won the award there. Which was very nice. I've still got it at home now. And I think we were also nominated one in Leicester as well.
So the country music scene in Britain has kind of gone off the boil a lot. There seems to be less and less clubs around. It seems to be that a lot of the clubs, certainly in the Warwickshire area, where some of the clubs have been going 20-odd years and have decided to fold because the audience were kind of getting older. There was no new blood coming into the scene, and the country clubs really had to make a choice of go down the line dancing route or effectively phase out because the traditional country was beginning to not be as popular as it used to be. How did you find the British country scene as of late?
I found when we were doing it, we were a lot ahead of what people wanted. They were like the old type music, and the new stuff wasn't being accepted as much. Like you do a venue and they still come up with do Crystal Chandelier, do My Best Friend, but I think it's caught up now, possibly with the introduction of CMT, which now a lot of people have got that. The country music enthusiasts have all got that channel, so they're aware of all the new stuff what's coming out. And like you say, the line dancing thing probably was a breath of fresh air to some clubs, but to a listening club, it wouldn't be the ideal situation.
How do you react yourself as a band to line dancing venues? 'Cause I'm sure you've played a few. I mean, I heard, I wasn't actually at the venue, but when the Bellamy Brothers played London recently, it was sort of so disappointing to know that there was such a great band on stage of tremendous musicians, and half the audience were just looking at what their feet were doing, which was a bit of a tragedy, really. How do you feel about, as a band member, the line dancing clubs?
As I say, I haven't done many recently of these line dance clubs, but I think they're okay, providing they line dance, but not to every single song you do. For argument's sake, like in America, they line dance to a line dance song, and then when it comes to a waltz or a slow song, they will actually dance with their partners and make it into a proper dance. And they tend to sort of line dance to everything here.
So Pinkerton's Colours, certainly, say 10 years ago, you were very much right up there with the West Virginias and the Hillsiders and some of the bigger bands, characters like Stu Page and Raymond Froggatt, mentioned in the same breath. There seems to be a trend where the older established bands, if you like, have kind of not necessarily gone off the boil, but certainly they're not as high profile as before. Why do you think that is?
It's quite possibly because of the nature of the business, the economics of it, shall I say. Poacher, for instance, were only working so many days a week. I don't know what their setup is now. They were picking and choosing what venues they did. Colorado only come down from Scotland to do certain venues, whereas they were always around in every venue. But I think they pick and choose and possibly play out the country and only pick the venues that's viable for them to do. Whereas if you go to do these little clubs, some of these little clubs, it's just not worthwhile for the band to sort of like economically to sort of, certainly with them being based in Scotland, I can well imagine it's feasible.
But the news these days, of course, Pinkerton's Colours still touring around under the name Pinkerton's Colours, and you've still got Mike Summerson, you've still got Phil Clough, and the drummer's been with you for a while as well.
Yes, that's right. He's been with us, Peter Robbins. He's been a fair while with us, you know. Some 16, 17 odd years or something like that, yeah.
That's not bad at all,
That's
keeping
good.
A whole band together for 16 odd years. I mean, what's the secret?
I don't know. It's right. I mean, I think, like I say, it's understanding each other, and I think working together as a band. I mean, we'd played a lot of venues out the country. Different. I mean, we toured as this lineup. We have toured, like, say, Germany, Norway, Switzerland. We've been all over a lot of different countries in Europe, and so we know each other, very well.
Now, the new chapter, of course, in the Pinkerton's Colours story is the fact that you've got this double album out on Sequel Records. A guy called, is it Tony Rounce put it together? Was he
Yes.
the Country Music Association head at one point?
Yes. Well, I think he lived. I was talking to him. He told me he lived in Nashville for a while until he came back to England, and then he was working for Castle Communications. And it was his idea to put this together to get all the tracks that they had, the catalogue, the Pie catalogue. Which they could draw on any time they wanted. And it was just a question of getting some more songs, which I had a lot lying around on acetapes and tapes and discs and stuff like that. By the time we got them all together, we finished up with 41 tracks, which made 2 CDs, which was very nice.
Yeah, it must be nice to actually see these tracks see the light of day after so many years gathering dust on the old shelves there. Did you think this was ever going to happen, or was it a bit of a surprise?
No, I didn't. I thought that maybe they would never see the light of day. But as I say, they were laying around there, and it's very good now that they're all in one little package, which is very interesting. More or less the history of Pinkerton's Colours and Flying Machine are all there in one package.
Do you see Pinkerton's Colours, I mean, we're only 3 years, nearly just over 2 years, in fact, away from the millennium. Pinkerton's Colours, I'm sure, will still be going strong in the year 2000 and beyond. But have you kind of settled as a band that are just doing your own thing and doing the gigs? Do you think that the days of charts, stardom and stuff are pretty well gone now? Or do you think there's something up your sleeve which might take you into a new audience?
Well, you never know what's around the corner. This is the thing. I mean, I don't know. It seems to me that a lot of the 60s bands will go out and do these festivals and we were doing the nostalgia thing, which I think is great. It's very nice. It's great to do that. But there always wants to be something in the fire. I think an iron in the fire of some kind, whether it be the songwriting side of it, the performance side of it, recording side of it. Somewhere it's nice to be attached to the media.
Of course, the other chance is that Miramura could be picked up for a television commercial or something, which has happened to an awful lot of the old tracks. Any irons in the fire there?
Somebody once told me that they were going to sort of see if they could get it on a cosmetic programme, because that it looks to be there could be a good outlet for that, with a lipstick firm or some sort of eye makeup firm, whatever, women's cosmetics. It could be used for that.
And are Pinkerton's Colours going to go back into the studio and maybe cut a country album?
We did a thing called Heading West, which we did at a little studio in Oxfordshire, but it wasn't just, we just sold it on the road. Really, it was a road tape. But I think the possibility there, if you could get the songs together and a record company interested in doing it, would be worth doing it then, I think. But I don't know about. I mean, obviously you can always make a CD and a road CD just to sell on the road. That's also viable. But it's much nicer if you can do one that people will buy, out the shops.
And of course, get played on the radio.
Of course, that's right. If you can get radio play, that's much better than you just flogging it on the road. But I say I'm pleased with this one because it's very professionally put together, not the usual sort of like black and white. And they've made a really good job. Roger Dobson did a really good job on the sleeve, the patchwork poster that comes out.
Well, it's a nice package and well written as well by Stuart Coleman doing the sleeve notes, and a nice slice of nostalgia. Nice to get hold of the old tracks on CD that we can actually play on the radio. Tony Newman, it's been a pleasure to talk to you and sort of reflect over the past 30-odd years or so, and continue success with Pinkerton's Colours.
Thank you very much, Stuart. It's really nice to be with you, and it's nice to be able to play the disc to all your listeners. Thank you.